Hey, hello, this is Monte A. Melnick. I was the Ramones tour manager from the beginning to end, and you're listening to the RockStop with Chris Contra.
All right, you got the RockStop. Chris Contra here. Any longtime listener of this program knows if there's one band I can talk about day and night, it is the Ramones. My guest this evening has spent more time with the legendary punk rockers than just about anybody. He was there from the beginning to the end. I am, of course, talking about their tour manager for more than 20 years, Mr. Monte A. Melnick. How you doing, Monte?
Doing good, Chris. Doing good.
Great to have you here, man. There's so much to talk about. All those years around the world with them. And you wrote a terrific book called On the Road with the Ramones. I was wondering, how was the experience writing the book? Was it therapeutic? Was it an enjoyable experience?
Oh yeah, very, very cathartic experience going over 20 years working with a band. Sure.
Yeah, I mean, you got so many stories, and what was so great, what I liked so much about the book was, it's got your take, traveling with the Ramones. You saw it all. But you also had the Ramones themselves talking in the book, their experiences, as well as the crew members of the band, the family, the friends, the girlfriends. I mean, it was just an excellent read.
I try to get a lot of different viewpoints in the book.
Talking about, just being a tour manager, do you think it's a lot different these days being a tour manager as to when you started?
Oh, sure. The cell phones were hardly around in my day.
Yeah.
There was no GPS. I used maps, paper map,
right.
Stuff like that. And the fax machine was a big thing back then.
Yeah, it's definitely a different experience. But I think people that are interested in being, there's really nowhere you can go to try to figure out. You got to just kind of live the lifestyle of a tour manager. You can't really learn the stuff as
Well, no, I didn't start off as a tour manager. I worked my way up. I started doing sound for them, and if you read the book, in Performance Studios. And then when they started going on the road, I was doing everything, shipping equipment, and the bigger they got, the more people I could hire.
Right.
And I worked my way up to road manager to tour manager. So you kind of learn on the way.
I mean, a lot of people, they see the final product with the band on stage, kicking ass up there, and they don't realize what all goes into it.
That's exactly one of the reasons I wrote the book, was to try to give people an idea what it's like behind the scenes and underneath the group. There's a foundation underneath the group that people don't realize that's there, that if you have a lousy sound man, the group doesn't sound good. The horrible guitar roadie, the guitar doesn't sound good. So there's other people around that really affect the whole band experience. So that's why I try to bring out what it's like with the crew in a big band.
Yeah, absolutely. And the Ramones would have to be considered one of the hardest working bands. I mean, over 2,000 shows, over 20 years. They really, they hardly took time off. They would take a little bit of time off here and there, but they worked their asses off throughout their career. So it's all the more.
Absolutely. The problem was they really couldn't sell that many albums over the years, so they made their money on touring and selling merchandise. So that's why they had so many shows and stayed out on the road so long.
Do you think the lack of their mainstream success kind of bothered them? I mean, I know they've kind of talked about it. I've heard different Ramones say different things on the matter, but the actual lack of the mainstream success, how much did it really bother them?
Oh, it did affect them a bit and bother them. I mean, a lot of groups opened up for the Ramones, B-52s, Blondie, Talking Heads, who became huge groups and sold a lot more records than the Ramones could ever sell. So, they saw that happening, and it was kind of frustrating. That's why they kept on going through different producers and different albums to try to get a hit record to sell some more records. Yeah,
and they pretty much culminated with the Phil Spector record in 1980, end of the century. Now, there has been so much made of that, the production of that record and what went on behind the scenes at Phil Spector's house. I mean, were you there? Did you see a lot of that?
Yes, I was there for the whole thing. Yeah, wow. Sure. I was up at the house. They locked me in and with the band and all that. And in the studio, it's pretty crazy, let me tell you.
Wow.
Pretty crazy.
Yeah, I mean, it's stories of, hearing Phil pulling guns on the guys and threatening them and locking them in rooms, like you said. It's, I mean, that guy was, so all those stories are pretty much true, huh?
Oh, yeah, and we know where Phil is now, right?
Yeah, I guess that's true. Yeah, that makes sense of how it would end up for him, but...
I mean, initially they wanted to, they were all big fans of Phil Spector. He's a brilliant producer, and they loved his producing, but little did they know how crazy he was until they got into the studio with him,
Yeah, they just knew the legacy of the guy, and it wasn't until they actually met him and realized, how...
and although Into the Century is one of the biggest selling Ramones albums,
And it is a great album. I mean, I love it a lot. I've heard rumors that, like, Joey was really the only one that was a Ramone that performed on it. I mean, how much of that is true? Like, how much of Dee Dee's bass is on there, Johnny's guitar?
Oh, they all played on it. It's all them playing.
Yeah, Phil did he want to bring in other musicians or?
They were there.
Yeah.
I mean, they played on it. No, I don't think they brought in very many other musicians besides Ed might have played some guitar. He's Ed Stasium.
Yeah.
He always played some background guitars.
Yeah.
Stuff like that. But it's them there, basically.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great album, and it's one of my favorites in spite of all the controversy going on around with Phil Spector and things like that. But
actually, the people ask me, what's your favorite Ramones song? And that's kind of hard because I like a lot of Ramones. I actually have one favorite Ramones song, and it's on that album. Do you have any idea which song that would be?
I'll go with Danny Says.
No, that's about Danny Fields, the manager.
I thought maybe some behind-the-scene thing going on there.
It's you probably don't. I mean, it's not one of the biggest songs. All the Way. Are you familiar with it?
Oh yeah.
Because Joey wrote me into the song. Monte's driving me crazy. It's like being in the Navy.
You gotta love that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's easy for me because the people, what's your favorite Ramones song? I like, it's hard, but it's easy for me. I just picked that one.
Very good point. Very good point. Yes. You were, I introduced you as the tour manager of the Ramones, and I guess that was your title, but you were really a hell of a lot more than that to the band. I mean, you were like a confidant to these guys, and a lot of it's documented quite brilliantly in your book. So it was way more than just a tour manager.
Well, tour manager covers a lot of different areas, so not just, touring. It's also a lot of different areas of personality, diplomatic personality, dealing with people and crews and stuff like that. I not only had to deal with a crazy band, I had to deal with a crazy crew, so it's like double the amount of nutty people I had to deal with,
That's right. The band, of course, has to come first in the whole thing, but you're right. The behind the scenes of the crew having to satisfy these guys, and I mean, they're the ones that make the, set up the show and get the gear all ready for the band. And by the way, how particular were the Ramones about their gear, like microphones?
Extremely.
Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, the first thing they did was, when they got some money, they bought some, decent equipment and Marshalls and Ampegs and good drum set. And actually, we were one of the first bands to bring out their own PA system on the road. They got together a PA system because they knew in the early years, most clubs had crappy PA systems. So They were very particular about all this equipment they bought and used.
Yeah, and over 2,000 shows. I mean, you better be. I want to ask you about just life on the road in general. Like, how important was, stopping at 7-Elevens or things like that? It all kind of, very important things, right?
Well, they had their little routines, and so after the show, they'd like to go to a 7-Eleven, buy some stuff for the hotel, and they tried not to party too much afterwards, or otherwise they wouldn't have lasted that long on the road.
Yeah.
Johnny always liked to go and get his little cookies and milk and stuff after the show, and so that's why that 7-Eleven and Quickie Marts were always there.
Yeah.
For the show, people found that amusing.
And you talk about, them not really partying too much. I mean, so many rock bands just, going balls to the wall partying. But and you're right. And a lot of them fizzle out after 3 or 4 years. They do not have the duration that the Ramones had. So that is an important point.
I mean, we had Dee Dee and there, and there was always a problem keeping him under control, and you know, he did OD a few times on the road and stuff like that. So it wasn't like all cookies and milk. You know?
Yeah, no, by no means. But Johnny knew to keep it together.
Yeah, he was good at that. He knew to keep things together.
Right, because you know, and you mentioned Dee Dee, who I know he was friends with a lot of the bands that were kind of into drugs and Heartbreakers and bands like that were, you know, really bad influence on him.
Yeah, and he was a bad influence on them too.
That's true, I guess so.
And out of the four originals, he was the only one that died the rock and roll life. He OD'd. I mean, the other four guys died of cancer and stuff like that.
Yeah, that is true. I thought he was going to clean it up there toward the end, and he seemed to be going well for a while, but he took that one extra time.
Yeah, actually, I thought when he left the group, but he would have been the first to really go, but he lasted longer than I thought. It's just a shame he had to have that last shot, you know?
Yeah, right, because even though that may have been the amount he always took, at that point his tolerance was gone, so it is a damn shame. But you mentioned maybe some of the guys partying harder than others, and Dee Dee in particular. When exactly did his hardcore drug problem start? I mean, was he always into drugs, or did it get progressively worse?
When he was growing up as a kid.
Yeah.
Sure.
He's I was wondering if maybe he just started hitting it just too hard at some points.
No, he was always a problem throughout the years.
Yeah, and I know Joey also struggled with some alcohol issues, and Marky.
You know, Marky that's why he got kicked out of the band, because he was an alcoholic. But I didn't think he'd turn his life around the way he did, but he did. I was amazed after all those years he got back into the band. But he was heavy alcoholic, and he went on a program and he learned his lesson, and he's still out there today, you know. Yeah,
right. And as far as when you're talking about Marky getting kicked out of the band, and then they brought in Richie Ramone there, who gave him about 4 or 5 good years of drumming, and then all of a sudden it was he was out of the picture. Is that I heard stories it's about t-shirt money and things like that?
Yeah, it was about the merchandising. He felt that he was being cut in as a equal part of the band as far as the merchandising. That's where they made their money on the road, merchandise and stuff. And of course they didn't want to cut in everybody, so they kind of got a little cheap there, and he got pissed off at that.
Yeah, and then did he kind of leave abruptly?
Yes, he did. Right after a show, I think we were playing on the Long Island, a club in Long Island, and right the back door to the dressing room opened to the outside. The show ended. He went to the dressing room, opened the back door. There was like a limo back there. Jumped into the limo, disappeared.
And he didn't say nothing.
No, nothing. Zero. He was gone.
Wow.
I mean, they tried to get him, because we were in the middle of a tour. We had a bunch of very high-profile shows coming up, so we, really wanted him to, settle it, or just play a few more shows and talk about it. But he just got pissed off.
They, of course, replaced him briefly there with Clem Burke, who was known as
Elvis Ramone.
Ramone. And were the Ramones kind of? I mean, I think he was out of Blondie at that point. Clem, of course. So was the Ramones?
Also managed by Gary Kerfurst, Blondie, and they were off at the time. And Clem was always a big friend. He was always hanging around CBGBs, and he knew the band very well. I think he really wanted to be in the band. Actually, I have 2 photos up now on auction of him in the band. They took some publicity photos. It's up on RR Auction.
Yeah, I happen to see
By the time this goes up in the air, they'll be over. But, he was serious. They took promo photos of him, and it didn't work out well. I mean, he didn't have enough time to really work his way in. Of course, Blondie, got back together, and he made a lot more money with Blondie.
Yeah.
But he's a great musician. He played with a lot of other bands too. But when Tommy decided to leave, Marky came in. He actually had to worked with Marky for about a month or so just to develop the whole Ramones style, because Tommy kind of invented that. Tommy was like a guitar player. He wasn't a drummer, and he kind of developed the Ramones style. It took Marky a little bit to work his way in. So Clem really didn't have enough time to work his way into the band, because we had to play these shows right away. And the problem with the Ramones is that there's such a tight set. Any little bit sounds off. That's what was the problem. So, but luckily Marky came back, and Clem went on with Blondie, and still with Blondie.
Yeah. So it wasn't like just Clem came in and was just going to play a couple shows. The Ramones kind of were hoping that he would be able to fit in and be their drummer, but it just didn't work out. So Marky entered. Right.
I actually saw Clem last week in L.A. I was hanging out with him.
Oh, yeah?
For the Johnny Ramone tribute show that Linda, Johnny's wife, has every year.
Yeah, okay. That's cool.
Out in L.A.
So when Marky came back, I just want to ask, he was clean, he was sober, and he just fit right back in. No adjustment period. They got right back into playing shows with Marky.
Well, yeah, because he had all those years. He knew what to do, and he's a great drummer. I mean, it's a terrific drummer.
Yeah, oh yeah, it absolutely is.
He fit right back in, and he was perfectly sober. I was amazed. So was the band that he cleaned his act up so well.
And that was really the only beef, I guess, between him and the Ramones, was just that when they kicked him out and it was years without him, is that just because of his alcohol problems? It wasn't like they needed to hash out any other problems they had with him, right?
Oh, that was a problem. That's the main problem. It just got out of control. He had to miss a big show, and that cost him money, and then he's, getting sloppy and stuff. So
yeah, I got you. Going back to, of course, this band, there's so many great things about the Ramones. Of course, the music, the live show, but the personalities of the guys was what makes them so much more interesting. On top of all their greatness, is that they were so different, which led to a lot of conflicts and things like that. But yourself as the tour manager, how do you deal with so many different personalities that are like that?
Well, that's the trick of being a good tour manager, road manager. You got to deal with different personalities and juggle them around and make sure that they're happy. And even a lot of times they'd like to play practical jokes on me instead of them, which is okay because they could do it to me. I wouldn't, but if they start doing it to each other, they'd really get pissed off, So that's all another, you got to juggle around personalities. Also with crews and stuff and managers of clubs and record companies, you got to deal with a lot of different people and personalities. So that's also part of being a good tour manager or a road manager or production manager. There's a lot of different managers in bigger bands.
Yeah, absolutely. Was the biggest rift, do you think, between Joey and Johnny over Linda?
Yes, of course.
Yeah.
Definitely. But that's an old rock and roll story, I mean, was it Clapton and who was his girlfriend she stole from somebody, or somebody stole his girlfriend? It happens all the time in rock groups. Not all the time, but a lot.
I guess the difference is in those other situations is that the guys kind of get over in other bands, I guess, the guys kind of get over it and, they hook up with other chicks and, they forget about it in a sense, and maybe they never really do. But in Joey and Johnny's case, it seemed like they just, it caused such a tension between them that they just would never talk really anymore.
Well, that's overblown, basically. I mean, for God's sakes, they stayed together for all those years. They realized that the music was more important.
Yeah.
So instead of like fighting with each other, they just kind of weren't good friends.
Right.
And a lot of it kind of over the years, the stories get overblown and they talk to not a lot, as much as they should have talked to each other, but they had to talk to each other. They did albums of music they played.
Yeah.
They realized the music was much stronger than them killing each other and breaking the band up.
Absolutely. I mean, it's something that bands like Guns N' Roses or Black Sabbath could not do. I mean, they had to separate for a while. The Ramones were able to hold it together, like you said, for 22 years, which is that's because they were a touring band, and then they made that. When you go out, do you play an instrument at all? I do not.
Oh, well, I was in a couple bands. If you read my book, I was on stage.
Yeah.
I had albums on Reprise Records. I know it's like you walk out on stage and you're playing and you get that feedback. It's like a high. That's why a lot of musicians, when they come off stage, they want to keep that high going. They go turn to drugs or alcohol.
Right.
And it's a big high when you're up standing on stage. There's thousands of people applauding you and idolizing you, and it's a drug. And they realized they had that going, and they kept on putting out albums. They enjoyed playing, writing the music and doing the albums and playing live. So that's why they stayed together.
I get it. Yeah, absolutely. And so a lot of that stuff with Linda is, though it was a bad situation, you're saying it was overblown and that they were still able to work together. I mean, was it more like a business relationship rather than bandmates, would you say?
Yeah, the later years, yeah. I mean, in the beginning, they were friends. They grew up together in Forest Hills.
Right. So it wasn't always bad, I guess. And
no, it was only the later years when Johnny decided to go with Linda, and Linda married him, and Joey was upset about that. It just wasn't easy, and it's not an easy thing to get over.
Yeah. Was Linda ever hanging around the Ramones after this, like with Johnny?
Well, the problem was he kept her very off to the side, secret, away from. He knew he couldn't flaunt her around. No, he kept her out of the scene. She came to shows. She stayed away, back, and even where Joey could see her.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I wondered about that because I guess that would be the way Johnny would have had to handle it because
it was awkward, but he kept it that way.
As far as like time management goes with the Ramones.
How important was it? Of course. You got to get the band to the show on time. You got to get them on stage on time. You got to get them off stage on time.
Yeah.
Got to get them in and out of the hotels on time. Sure, that's all part of tour managers. A lot of different things people don't realize that tour managers deal with. Hotels, getting in and out of restaurants, picking up money at the gigs, paying crews, buying equipment, making sure the equipment's right, blah, blah, blah. There's a whole list that's in the book. That's why I kind of write the book to kind of give people an idea of what the crew goes through.
Right. It's
I put in like the rooming lists and the catering lists and stuff like that to just give an idea what it's like,
Exactly, and it's great for Ramones fans, but it's also good for anybody who's in a band to read the book. So definitely, the book is On the Road with the Ramones. Cool cover, by the way. I really like it a lot.
Of course, I worked with 8 different Ramones. There was only 4 Ramones in a band at a time, so I was, what am I going to put on the cover,
Yeah.
So I figured, let's come up with a cartoon of me in the band in a van with all 8 Ramones, and we're leaving New York. And who's better to do a cartoon than John Holmstrom?
And I noticed in the cover, Johnny is sitting shotgun. Was that always how it went?
Yeah, he always sat there.
Yeah.
The positions they're sitting in usually were where they were sitting in the van.
That's very cool. So speaking of the legacy of the Ramones, as of right now, it's really unfortunate that the main guys are gone. They're all gone. They can't see what's become of it. Like I was talking about earlier, the lack of their mainstream success seems to be huge now in the mainstream. The Ramones are everywhere.
Now, the Ramones are bigger than they ever were when they were around.
Yeah.
I have a joke now. I've told this 1,000 times. I'll tell it 1,001 times. If the Ramones were this big when I was working for them, I would have gotten a big raise.
Yeah.
I mean, they're unbelievably big now. It amazes me how huge the Ramones are. Everybody knows the Ramones.
It's true. And I mean, what do you think happened in all those years that during their run, they were not reaching this kind of success? Now they are.
I don't know. It's kind of like when somebody passes away, they become bigger somehow. And people finally caught up with what they were doing and realized there was something that was not just 3 chords and simple stuff.
Yeah.
They did, their music meant something, and was people liked the music and what they were talking about. And for God's sake, they're on jock rock albums. You go to a baseball game and they say, "Hey, let's go!" They're chanting. It's the whole the thought of that, I would have loved that if you saw that going on now.
Yeah, definitely. They were certainly revolutionary in music. I mean, they really did create the punk scene there. When they went to England in '76, of course, everybody was there. I mean, the Clash went to see them, the Sex Pistols, but that was before they were those bands. They all went to see the Ramones, and then they spawned a million different bands. Did the Ramones see that happening? Like when they came back, the realization of how important that trip to England was?
Well, that was a quick 2 shows. Then when they came back in '77, they did a big tour with the Talking Heads all over the place in Europe and England. That's where I think a lot of groups saw them too,
Mm-hmm.
And the thing with the Ramones, I kind of think they're like the Johnny Appleseeds of music, punk music, because they would go out, play all over the places, small towns and cities, and that people never heard that type of music before, and kids would say, "Hey, if they can do it, we can do it." And so the legacy of the Ramones now, which is amazing me, all these giant bands actually came and saw the Ramones and were inspired by them to form groups like Bono, who gives them great credit. On the tour now, the big song is The Miracle of Joey Ramone, or, they sing that song. And Metallica were huge fans that saw them in Ohio when they were kids and give them credit for inspiring them. And a lot of groups saw them and just, as I said, like the Johnny Appleseed, they kind of went all these places and clubs and spread the seeds around, and all these bands popped up.
Absolutely. And they were on the road so much. I mean, there were not too many breaks for the Ramones, but one that kind of is a little foggy in the Ramones history, maybe you can clear this up, was I think it was late in 83 or 84 that the Ramones had to take a break because Johnny suffered an injury.
Yeah, he got into trouble with his one of his ex-girlfriends. He caught her with another guy, and the guy kicked him in the head, almost killed him.
Wow.
He had like a brain injury. We had to take some time off for that. That made the front page papers here because it was Roxy was Whitney, or Whitney is, the famous Whitneys, and so it kind of made the front page,
yeah.
Here. And it was scary. He almost died.
Wow. So that was a very scary moment there in 83 or 84.
All right. Yeah, somewhere around.
Wow. So yeah, they had to take. How long hiatus was in store?
A month or two or so, or three.
Yeah, and then he got back out there, and
yeah, he recovered, thank God, and got back.
Wow.
Was able to do what he was doing.
Yeah, that's a wild story right there. I want to talk about a little bit about the movie Rock and Roll High School. When they did this, this was right after Tommy left the band, I think, and Marky got in there. Did Tommy know about this movie coming up, or?
I'm not sure whether he knew about it or not. He probably knew about it. They talked to him,
Yeah, I mean, I was thinking maybe I wonder if he was disappointed at all he wasn't in the movie. But I know he was out of the band at that time. But
let me tell you, Tommy didn't want to be in the band. He wanted to produce them and manage them.
Yeah.
And it was rough. Touring was hard with him. He didn't really like touring, you know what I mean?
Right.
He wanted to produce and stay in the studio.
Yeah.
And so as I said, when they were first got together, as I write in my book, in Performance Studios, they were a three-piece band. Joey was on drums, Dee was singing, playing bass, and Johnny was singing guitar. And Tommy came in to Performance Studios, where I was working with him, just to produce them and manage them. But Dee was struggling with singing and playing bass, and he heard Joey had a good voice. He pulled Joey off the drums. Joey started singing, and they started looking for drummers, but nobody could understand. Those early years, they were so raw, it was unbelievable. Mm-hmm. Nobody could understand what they were doing. But Tommy was a great musician. He was a guitar player, but he also could play. He sat down on drums and developed his drum style.
Yeah.
And they said, well, join the band. He said, okay, I'll join the band, But he really initially didn't want to be in the band. He just wanted to produce them.
Yeah, and he gave them many great years. Some of their greatest albums were with Tommy on drums. And
yes.
But the road was just too much for him, huh?
Yeah, exactly. And he came off the road. They found Mark. He worked with Mark. Mark fit in, and then he started producing the albums.
Yeah, and they worked out. Those were great albums too. Too Tough to Die, and just one of their best albums. I mean, I gotta say every album is got some type of greatness to it, and I really do love them all. What would you say is your favorite, or top couple Ramones albums?
Oh my God, I like them all. I mean, I can't really pick one out.
Yeah.
Too Tough to Die is great. I like that. I like End of the Century, as I said, because I like the song, and they all have their own songs in them that I like, here and there. So it's kind of hard to pick one.
All right, I got you. So back to the movie for a minute. Do you remember the screening when you guys all went to see the Rock and Roll High School movie? How that went?
Nothing really pulls up my mind. They all enjoyed the movie. Yeah. I'm in the movie there briefly.
Oh yeah.
When they're singing, I just want to have something to do. They're in the car.
Right.
Are you familiar with the movie?
Oh yeah, absolutely.
Pulling up to the venue in a pink Cadillac, and Rodney from Rodney and the Rocks in LA is driving.
Yep.
Rodney Biggenheimer, and they're singing, I just want to have something to do. They pull up in front of the theater, and I come out, and you watch, I come out and open the door, walk, and I shake the hand of the manager. You can see me, I'm right in front of the screen, and I walk behind them as they're singing the song.
Right.
Kind of playing the producer of the show, because I'm talking to the manager, pointing out things if you look at the scene. And then there's another scene, they're running in the backstage hallway, and there's a shot of me laughing back there.
How was it seeing yourself up on the big screen?
I like that. It's fun.
Yeah, absolutely. So I want to talk about, as far as, again, mainstream success, would you say their biggest mainstream hit was Pet Sematary?
I'm not sure. As I said, End of the Century is the biggest selling album, so...
I meant just like as far as a single goes.
I'm not sure. You got me on that one.
Yeah, because I remember that was a pretty big hit for him there, and I remember they performed that on the Letterman show, and it was just Joey and Johnny, which I thought was where they played with Paul Schaefer's band.
Yeah, that was strange. I don't know why they didn't have the whole band come in. That's a strange thing.
Yeah, where was Marky at that time?
They just wanted those, sometimes when you do a big show like that, they say, we're doing it this way, and they did it. They wanted to get on, so.
Oh, so that was like Letterman's, the Letterman show. Yeah, okay. I see. And then, as far as like, the image of the band, of course, everybody knows the leather jackets and the haircuts and all that kind of stuff. Arturo Vega with the seal that, has become so synonymous with the band, and when some of his backdrops while the band was playing, what were the thoughts of going into like creating some of those?
Well, he was an amazing artist, and he was always sort of had a time, and he hand painted a lot of those early backdrops, the big, huge backdrops. He'd see a loft would hand paint them. Wow, it was amazing. He was always brilliant lighting director because of his artistic pursuit and coming up with the logo like that. And he was, unfortunately, Arturo and myself were the only people alive as of a few years ago that were with the band from the beginning to end. Yeah. And now I'm the only one left that was there from the beginning to end.
I mean, does that feel kind of surreal sometimes?
Yeah, it's definitely. I got to knock on some wood now. I feel better.
Definitely.
Yeah, it's strange because he was alive, and then he passed away a couple of years ago. Yeah. And he was the only one, him and myself, that were there from the beginning to end. I mean, Joey and Johnny were there from the beginning to end, but they're not here anymore. And of course, Tommy's gone, and Didi's gone, and et cetera, et cetera. Richie was there at the end. Marky was only there, not from the beginning. Yeah. So it's a strange feeling.
Do you miss it a lot when you think back on those days, or is it just a part of your past?
It's a good part of it. They worked their way up to where it was very nice. Better venues, better accommodations, better hotels, stuff like that, and traveling the world. Sure, I missed all that. The end of it, the beginning was rough. Luckily, I was a younger man and I could handle it. Yeah. Now, if I went on the road, I'd have to be a big band and, just have the comforts of the road, which can be nice if you have a lot of money.
Right. That's a big part of
big
it.
Enough.
I mean, Speaking
of Pet Sematary, Stephen King was a huge Ramones fan.
Yeah, right.
He was a huge fan, and he wanted he had a concert in Bangor, which he brought Cheap Trick and the Ramones up to Bangor to play. I think they had one. We opened up for them, but he only invited the Ramones back to his house. And the Cheap Trick was pissed off. And he's a huge Ramones fan. So we went up to this huge mansion he had in the woods there. It was really crazy. And he said to the band he liked to listen to loud music like the Ramones and write his horror stories.
Wow. Did he tell you any of the stories he ever came up with while jamming out to the Ramones?
Well, I think he mentions the Ramones in one or two of his books. So he's listening to a Ramones song or some Ramones song come up or something. He's just a big fan.
Yeah, that's awesome. I mean, the guy's a genius in his own right. So that's very cool. You talk about the humble beginnings of the Ramones and how later on it was a lot easier to be on tour. But you tell a few stories about the band's van getting busted into.
Well, over the years, in the beginning, we had stuff stolen, vans stolen. Later on, we had trucks stolen, and, that's the perils of the road sometimes,
Yeah, that sucks, but a lot of
people have days, I read stories about bands getting stuff stolen all the time.
I know, you hate to hear that stuff, but it does happen. I wanted to ask you, there was another story in your book about a show the Ramones were playing in Aberdeen, Washington, kind of in the early days. That's the hometown of Kurt Cobain, of course, who came with Nirvana, became very famous. The Ramones were supposed to play like 2 hours, but they ended up, whoever booked them didn't realize the Ramones blitzed through the set, and they were done in 35 minutes.
Well, I mean, we got booked in some strange clubs in the beginning early, and people didn't realize what type of a band the Ramones were, so they booked them in oddball clubs. I think this is like a lumberjack club or something, and the Ramones played short set at the time, and of course I think the promoter or the club owner said you go back on stage because he only played half an hour. You got to play some more, or he wouldn't pay us. And the audience wasn't very receptive to the Ramones either. They're like lumberjacks, and
Yeah.
It was rough.
Yeah, I mean that's wild stuff on the road there with that band. And speaking of, you see a lot of or some of the stuff on the road in Marky's footage. Of course, he released Ramones Raw, which a lot of cool footage is in those documentaries or whatever you want to call them, road videos. Was Marky always carrying a camcorder around?
Well, later on, he decided to film it, and I think in the back of his mind, he wanted to put out a video. So yeah, later on he carried his camera around with him. Did
it bug the guys at all that he's filming all the time, or?
Oh no, not Johnny gave him a hard time, but they didn't care.
I remember one of the scenes in Ramones Raw. It appeared the band got into a bit of a fender bender.
You talking about in Italy?
Yeah, I think it was. Yeah.
Yeah, sure. I mean, sometimes the drivers of the van. I wasn't driving in Europe. I wouldn't drive or anything. So the driver got into a little accident, and we were stuck on the side of the road there for a little bit. So Marky was filming. Yeah.
As far as the later years with the Ramones, I remember they used to go on Howard Stern a lot, and I know they had some pretty bitter arguments there, especially Joey and Marky. What was your thought on some of that stuff?
That's high school antics.
Yeah.
What are you going to do? They had their little tips and riffs, and they took it out on each other, and that's what Howard Stern fed upon. Wrote that stuff and encouraged them to do more. Yeah. I love this stuff. Fight. Not he didn't say that, but that's what he liked.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. He absolutely loved when they would argue. He seemed to think that was getting the best radio out of them. But
right.
I mean, these guys are entertaining, even when they were going back and forth. Joey was a very, very funny guy, huh?
Oh yeah, he's terrific.
Yeah,
Marky, he'll be funny too. He was always the clown.
Yeah, he was the one cracking the most jokes.
Yeah.
Yeah. So as far as traveling on the road with them a little bit, we've all heard the stories about the Yankees were usually on the radio. Did they band ever? Yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, Johnny was a big, huge Yankee fan. If you notice in the cover, he's wearing a Yankee shirt.
Oh yeah. He loved the Yankees. Did he go to a lot of games or?
Yeah, as many as he could. In fact, on the road when they had some days off, he'd go watch either a major league game or a minor league game somewhere.
Yeah, he loved baseball.
Yep.
Did you guys ever listen to other stuff in the van? You ever turn on Howard Stern or other
No,
music?
not Howard. But, later on, they all had their own little earphones and Walkmans or whatever they had. And so Johnny would have his little transistor radio plugged into his ear and listen to the radio. We didn't have to all listen to it, So
yeah, right.
They all had their own individual music playing,
Yeah, right. Okay. So that made the trips a little more tolerable, I guess, that they didn't have
Otherwise, they'd kill everybody listening to one thing,
Yeah, they had a difference of opinions on just about everything, I would imagine, yeah. I remember they did the MTV had them do a Rock the Vote thing. That had to be a little uncomfortable. I mean, Joey and Johnny were completely different ends of the spectrum with that. Was that, was that any issues there?
No. Who became a huge friend of Johnny was Eddie Vedder.
Yeah. Yeah, right.
I mean, because of the baseball, he was a huge baseball man. But here's two opposite political views there, but became very good friends.
Yeah, that's good to hear. Yeah.
When we played South America, he came down and spent a week with us. He had some time off and spent a week.
Oh, that's cool. That was
Ramones.
Was that on the last tour there in '96?
One of the last tours of when we played in South America.
Oh, okay. I remember hearing.
And we also did a tour with Pearl Jam. They became good friends, and later Eddie was hanging out at Johnny's house a lot.
Yeah, and they became friends with a few bands. Soundgarden, I think, right? They were pretty cool.
With who?
With Soundgarden?
Metallica. And Soundgarden too. I mean, that was the Lollapalooza festivals, Metallica, Soundgarden, Rancid, and Ramones.
Yeah.
The thing about that was amazing part about that was, Ramones went on, and then they were down fourth on the bill, but I'm standing on the stage, or Ramones on stage, I'm looking at the side of the stage, and there's Metallica, Soundgarden. They're all big fans.
Yeah.
They're very friendly. And they said they were influenced by the Ramones, and that's what amazed me. Here's his major acts headlining, and here's the Ramones fourth on the bill, and there's other bands are standing there idolizing them.
Exactly, and those bands are of all different genres too. I mean, it's not just punk bands, the metal and everything else. Love the Ramones, and that's great to see and hear about. Speaking of the band's retirement, as we're talking near that time with the Lollapalooza and things, when was the decision made that the band was going to retire? When did they say this is it?
Well, so the last year, I mean, they tried to hold out as long as they could, and Joey just got, his health was not that great, so Johnny decided, what the heck, let's do it this year, 96, and Joey said, okay, and they decided, and they did it. Marky didn't want to stop.
No. I remember when they were on Howard Stern arguing over, doing one or two shows in South America that Joey didn't want to do. And
right, yeah, because Marky would have gotten a lot of money to play the shows, and Joey didn't care. His health was more important, and Mark didn't realize it was more a health thing, and got pissed off at Joey for not doing it.
Yeah, and then after the breakup or the retirement, I guess, having to do things like pick out track listings for the anthology album. I just wonder if it was if it was a difficult thing for them to agree on.
John moved to L.A. and Joey stayed in New York, they kind of I think Ed Stasium had a lot to do with getting together, doing stuff. Anthology albums, putting things together. The management pulled everything together,
Right. Okay. So, after it was all said and done, did you ever have a feeling that they could possibly reunite, say in the late 90s? You had a thought of that?
It was always in the back of my mind that they could have probably, if Joey's health was better, got together. I mean, look who's still around, the Rolling Stones and Sex Pistols actually got back together. I mean, sure.
Yeah.
It was in the back of my mind, but far in the back of my mind.
Yeah, right. Speaking of the Sex Pistols, did you have any experience? Did you meet Sid Vicious and Nancy?
Yeah, sure. He was a big Dee fan. He came back to a few concerts. I got him backstage a few times. So Johnny Rotten came back, and then London did the stuff, and there's a famous joke about the Ramones never liked to have beer in pitchers. They always wanted bottled beer. They hated canned beer, but they really didn't want pitchers of beer, because in the beginning they get these pitchers of beer, and what they do is they piss in the beer, and then they invite people in and laugh at them if they were drinking the beer. And Johnny Rotten, actually, that happened to him. He came back and was drinking the beer, and they were laughing.
Oh, man. So as we wind down here, it's been really great talking with you. This is Monte Melnick here on the RockStop. I wanted to ask you about going back, I guess, a little bit to the whole Linda situation. The song KKK Took My Baby Away. I think a lot of fans kind of, really believe that is about Johnny stealing Linda away from Joey. Johnny, did the song. Did he ever ask what it was about? Did he bother?
That's a story I kind of perpetuated that myth, because John did have a KKK card as a joke. He had a card. He had a KKK card with him. They kept as a bookmark. So I kind of thought that Joey wrote that song about him, but Joey's brother, said Joey wrote it well before that. So.
Oh, okay.
I say that, and then eventually in the movie, that's what I kind of perpetuated a bit. It sounds good. It's a good little story.
It is a good story, and it all goes behind the mythology of the Ramones. There's so much out there.
Yeah.
As to what's true and not, and it's an unbelievable legacy though that they left, and just one of the all-time great bands, great American bands, and like you said, all the bands they influenced and inspired of all the different genres. And I think now, it's great to great to have you around and talking about all this stuff, because a lot of people don't realize a lot of the backstage antics and the life on the road and things like that, you know.
I'm happy to be still around. And this book kind of brings out what it's like behind the scenes with the crews and other things besides just the band.
Yeah.
What it's like on, getting out there and playing music with bands.
Absolutely. And one last thing here about some of the solo albums that the Ramones did after they broke up. You know, Joey did his album "Don't Worry About Me," which I really thought had some good highlights on there. What were your thoughts on some of the solo stuff?
Oh, Joey's albums are great.
Yeah.
CJ's got some nice. CJ's got some nice albums. Actually, when the Ramones retired, I managed Marky Ramone and the Intruders, and I got him his first deal. So I was his manager for a while.
Oh, wow.
So actually, there's 3 Ramones bands out there right now. Marky Ramone has a band, CJ Ramone has a band, and Richie Ramone has a band. They're all playing the world.
I had CJ on the show when he was promoting his latest album, American Beauty, which I thought was really stellar. I mean, he did a great job on that record.
Oh, he's terrific. CJ's great. I mean, he's amazing.
Yeah, and he must have been.
I mean, it's the band the way he did, and filling in Dee Dee's shoes and taking it from there. I got to give him a lot of credit. Yeah, he just moved from Long Island. He's out in the Bay Area now.
Yeah, he's a great guy and very talented too.
Yeah, definitely.
So, all right, man. I really appreciate you doing this interview. And again, everybody, go out and check out Monte's book, On the Road with the Ramones. It is an essential read for all Ramones fans, and it's really, really great stuff. So thanks a lot, Monte, for doing this interview.
My pleasure. Gabba gabba hey.
Gabba gabba hey. All right, man. Take care.
Okay.